This is the final phase of the Fitness Center analysis, phase 2, looking for staffing shortages. So now that you've had it explained how to create a staffing projection based on the averages and a projected number of entrants by using the minimums and maximums, we need to finish the staffing projection to see where there might be shortages. This is going to use the same assumption of staffing ratio, but instead of using the averages, it's going to use the changing results of the projected number of entrants from down here. So that we're going to do the same kind of calculation that we did here, only, well, there's two parts to it. The first is that we need to find out what our real required staffing would be given the Monte Carlo simulation of people coming in. So let's do that. That's going to mean I take the number of people who come in. Actually, let's just remind ourselves what the formula looks like. In fact, we can copy this formula and modify it. So what we're going to do, let's just do if this, okay, and bring it to here and paste it. And instead of B4, now it's going to be down here. This is K25. And then as far as our rounding up, it's again going to be K25. So what we're doing here is we're checking to see if K25 is greater than 0. If it is, then we are going to round up K25 divided by K1, because this is the actual number of people who are needed in the staffing given the number of people coming through the door. So that would be just a staffing projection based on need. However, having finished that, now what we do is we subtract the actual staffing. Actually, let's do the other way around. Let's go in front of that and take the staffing projection we have and subtract what our staffing projection should be. So this will create a negative number where we don't have enough staff, rather than a positive number showing the shortages in a positive. So K4 is what we say we're going to have for staffing, and then the if statement, the staff calculation, is what our numbers down here would say that we should have. So I'm going to hit enter, and we have a 0. I'm going to copy that down, and I'm going to copy it across. Now you'll see there are negative ones here, and occasionally we're overstaffed, but we're not as worried about being overstaffed as understaffed. Here it's a 3. But if I press F9, the key F9, you will see that these change because scrolling down just a little bit, you'll see that these constantly change as I redo my simulation. So this is like week by week what our predictions are for the number of entrants coming in, and then week by week based on this staffing plan where we're going to run short. Now there's more that could be done in terms of, for example, here I can't have 5 staff at 2 o'clock and 4 staff here. I'm not going to get one person in. And so this should be revised on the basis of 2 things. One, on the basis of trying to minimize the number of large shortages of staff, but also in terms of realistic staffing levels. I'm going to have to obey certain staffing rules, like I can't bring somebody in for an hour. Probably I need to bring them in for at least 3 hours or something, and I see a 5 and then a 4 and then a 6, so I may very well have 6 staff for this area. So this is just a beginning place for our staffing, and we would want to revise this not only based on staffing rules about how many hours minimum for a shift or proper shifts, things like that, but then also to accommodate what happens here in terms of shortages. Now, 2 things that will help us recognize where our big bad shortages are. Under conditional formatting, we're going to highlight cells that are less than 0. So in other words, we're going to do light red fill with dark red text whenever it's a negative. But negative ones, you know, sometimes you push your staff. If you don't have too many negative ones, you'll live with that in terms of the number of staff. But you really don't want it to be more than a negative one very often. So these negative twos, these are a bit of a concern. So we're going to add another level of conditional formatting so that if it's less than negative 1, then we're going to do a custom format where we do a dark red color. For the font we want a yellow, and for the border, the fill, then we're going to do a darker red. So that now, click OK, and you can see where you have your colors light up. So as I do this, you start to see the hot spots, so to speak, in terms of staffing shortages. So as I said, I would look at something like this and look at the areas that seem to be consistently short. And then I would revise the plan, again, consistent with staffing rules, to try and come up with a good staffing plan that doesn't give me too many of these really bad staffing situations. Now, there's a further step that can be done, and that is to actually count up the number of bad staffing shortage situations. So what we're going to do here is we're going to see how many staff shortages total we have. So this is going to be using equals count if, and my range is going to be the whole week of staffing. I can F4 to lock the dollar signs on that. Can you see it up here? So I've locked in count if that, and you see we have a range and then we have a criteria. So I'm going to put the comma, and now for the criteria in this case is going to be anything less than 0. Notice that I have to put it in quotes. I don't always have to do that. If I put a single numeric value, I don't have to. But an expression like this, like less than 0, must be in quotes. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to hit enter. And I see that in this situation, if I was to count them up, I would find that I have a total of 24. Now, I'm going to take that and copy it over. And now in this situation, I'm going to revise my condition, and I can take all of that out and make my condition 1, or I should say -1. So where I have -1, well, that's 11 of them. By the way, you'll notice that it recalculates every time I change a value and hit enter. So now up to 17, 11 of them are a shortage of 1. I'm going to continue here. Let's just take this across. And here, this is going to be simply a -2. This is going to be a -3. And then I'm going to retake this first one and put it here, because for greater than 3, now I have to change this, this here to less than -3. And then less than -3 will give me anything more than that. Now, what we see here then is if I hit F9, those numbers will keep changing, and we'll see what happens. One more step we can take, rather than having to hit F9, 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 we can actually build a table of scenarios. So this is one situation. If I hit F9, I'd get another scenario. But I can also use the data table function to create 15 or even up to 100 different scenarios or test weeks or whatever you want to call it, but iterations, opportunities to see what would happen in a given week. So what I'm going to do then is I am going to go into data, and I am going to go under the what if analysis, and I'm going to choose data table. skipped one step, so I'm sorry. I need to highlight, including a blank or labeled column to the left. This is important to include, and the top row must be the formula or formulas that I want filled in. So I'm sorry, I want that highlighted. And then you will go to the what if analysis, and you will do data table. And these are columns. Okay, we're going to fill in columns. So we want a column input cell, and basically we just want a cell that we're not going to use, like this, for example. We're not using this for anything, which allows Excel to use it for whatever reason it wants. It wants a place to do its scribble work, I guess you could say, or calculations. So we're giving it this as somewhere we're not using, and now we're going to click OK. And so what we now have is we have a whole set of 15 different scenarios, and we can start to see how often, for example, we get to a serious staff shortage time after time. And again, if I hit F9, I get a whole new set of 15. So it just multiplies my ability to project the consequences of my staffing plan based on my Monte Carlo simulation. And that is the conclusion for phase 2.